Well, Kimba's gone quite a bit of ways as it stands. Looking back at it so far, the White Lion already has quite a bit under his belt, taking form of numerous adaptations from the manga. We've discussed in depth the actual TV series from 1966 and 1989. But unfortunately for Kimba, the 1998 English dub for the 1989 anime will be the last we see of an actual TV series. Does this mean we're done with him? Well, according to the title, no we're not. Not by a long shot. We still got plenty of movies to go through, along with some special tidbits of information. So we got a ways to go before I close the franchise and move on to other stuff. Today's review is going to be looking into something a little different. Something new to the franchise has done so far. May I present to you all 1991's A Symphonic Poem. Now note, this didn't start off as a movie. Well, if you can call this one. The actual score was composed back in 1967 by Isao Tomita, who, fun fact, composed the original score for the original anime, often being sold at the time, namely as a CD. It wasn't until 1991, just a year after the 1989 adaptation, did this score get an illustration and animated adaptation. So how does the franchise hold up in terms of being a movie over a TV series? Let's go in and take a look. Given what all the other adaptations had done in the past, the plot regarding this one is admittedly one of the simplest to follow. Following the whole musical score linking to the animation, the symphonic poem's main story involves the first episode of either adaptation, showing Panja's time, his death, Kimba's birth, and his swim back. There's more going on, of course, but that's really the plot in a nutshell. Typically, a summary like that for a movie-long animation like this would be a bad thing, and admittedly, I guess my main criticism is that making one episode into an entire film means that the scenes themselves drag on for a pretty long time, the most notable parts being the very beginning and the time spent on the boat. These scenes sort of go on a little too long, and they padded it out with other scenes, but it's more like filler to me. To be fair though, the story isn't supposed to be very complicated. It's just an animation to link to the musical score, and nothing else, so odds are it would be a bit padded out in places depending on what the music wants it to be. That, and the story itself is self-explanatory anyway, either to newcomers to the franchise or veterans who are familiar with it. Besides, it's not like they made it too over the top and out of place so no one can follow it anyway. To me, it reminds me of the Rite of Spring segment from Fantasia. It only plays music and lets the visuals speak for itself. So given what they're going for, I say this works. A little draggy, but I'll let it slide. Speaking of the music, this is its biggest selling point. As I said, it has a Rite of Spring feel to it when it comes to this whole thing. It only has the music playing and letting visuals tell the story. As for said music, it keeps to the same power-filled tones it has been throughout the years, and you know, it actually has the Animals of Farthing Wood kind of way with it. You see, there is a lot of music that plays, and a lot of characters that show up. So of course, there's different instruments that play for different characters on screen. And my god, they do their job. They got a powerhouse of orchestra on display here, on par with the 1989 adaptation. And depending on when you watch this movie, it's quite amazing how clever some of these are. One part I want to show as an example here was when Panja first charges in after the poachers. At first it seems straightforward, the loud sounding trumpets signifying Leo charging in towards danger, and high-speed drums and lighter trumpets to show the unstoppable power he has to face. But then it suddenly switches it around, and it's Panja who's the unstoppable power, charging in at the poachers. Really good stuff. There's a lot more examples sprinkled in all over the place, and it's just great how well they can show specific elements like this throughout just music alone. I say that, but as with everything, there are also its flaws. And in this case, there's this one particular scene that still kinda bugs me. It happens just after the big ceremony with Panja and Eliza, and it shows Tomi and Coco wandering the forest and looking, I don't know, drunk? I mean, what's wrong with these two? There was no real clues as to what really happened with them, so to me, it kind of just looks like they're kind of just zoned out the whole time. I mean, yeah, I get they're tired, but from what? All it really shows is them looking just zoned out, drunk, and ready to pass out any minute here. And they don't really show enough to say what the deal actually is with this. Up next, we got the visual aspect of this symphonic poem. The visuals, on par, are very good. They still keep to the watercolor scenery and backgrounds throughout much of it, using mainly similar designs carried over from the 1989 series. Give it credit, it actually holds a very slight, cartoonish flair, more so than before when you make comparisons. Speaking of, some of the characters actually have different designs to them, as vague as some are. Coco, for instance, looks more similar to his 1965 counterpart than his 1989 one, with no red spot on his beak this time, and a more darker green color. Same thing with Panja. His snout's shorter, and his eyes are a bit more expressive than the 1989 remake. The biggest one is Kimba, who in this poem looks much more like a cub with larger eyes, and less hair and giving him a more childlike appearance. Now, I say there's flaws to it, and my main thing is that it didn't improve that much. All the other animals are pretty much a copy and paste of the 1989 adaptation, and unlike before the 1960s series, this had more time to update, and didn't do that much. Next is the animation, which admittedly has more flaws. Give it credit, there's absolutely zero reused animation, and everything is done from the ground up. Problem though is that some parts just look a little choppy and lazy. I mean, look at this chase. Most of the animals aren't really moving, and are kind of just floating there as they're being chased by these cars. This is top-notch elsewhere, but what's the deal here? It's not as notable as prior, but you'll notice it as it goes on. So, what else is there to say about this? Well, there's zero dialogue, so voice acting's out of the question. Continuity isn't a problem since it's own take off one episode. Let's give it my final thoughts then. It's okay. This feels less like a movie though, and more like an hour-long TV special, which isn't really bad per se. I just wish it didn't go on as long as it did. You know, not as much drag and more keep the plot going. If it kept a more decent flow, this would work a little bit better, but that's my own opinion really. I'd say give it a watch if you're curious about it.